Disrupting patterns of ancestral intergenerational trauma can definitely seem like a very daunting task. It may seem very, very complicated and also maybe even seem like something that's even impossible. But the truth is that there is a path and there is a process. There is also support and facts that help us not only create a pathway to disrupt these ancestral karmic cycles in our lineage, but also to learn to avoid the mistakes that most women make on their journey of ancestral karmic healing. So today I want to spend a little bit of time and share with all of you the three top mistakes that most women are making as it relates to their journey of healing and disrupting these ancestral karmic traumatic patterns from their lineage. So welcome, beautiful sovereign woman. Welcome in Satnam. Such an honor to be back with all of you here today. You know, we've been coming back live here every Wednesday at noon, and it feels so freaking good. It feels so good to have the clarity, to have the conviction, and to also have the energy, which is what we all need, to be able to deliver this information to all of you, because not only is it incredibly important, but the impact that it makes in your life and in the lives of your children and in future generations and the people that they're going to impact is so tremendous that it is something that we must not only be mindful about, but take very, very seriously. If you consider yourself to be a cycle breaker, this is what I call a sovereign woman who is disrupting these patterns of trauma, of pain, and emotional pain especially, then the journey upon you does not have to be so scary and also does not have to be so unknown. The good news is that in my work with women in the last 3 years of helping them also disrupt these terrible ancestral karmic patterns in their lineage, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about the mistakes that can be avoided and should be avoided, as well as what path to actually take to get the results that we're here to get. So let's go over these three very common mistakes that women make on their journey of breaking these cycles. So the first one that I want to talk about that actually most people skip over. In fact, when we think about traditional medicine in Western society, you know, it's literally like, especially as it relates to like things like anxiety or depression, mental health situations, when we go and approach the Western approach or the modern medicine approach of healing, really the path is so blocked because we're given a Band-Aid in essence. We are given a Band-Aid to put on a problem where we have not actually reached the root cause, because all physical illness starts with an emotion. And the language of our ancestors is of emotions. They translate and transfer these frequencies of emotions to us in our DNA. And as it relates to the things that they couldn't heal, if you had ancestors that went through a lot of trauma, child abuse, sexual abuse, relationship abuse, their own depression, anxiety, those things become imprints in the DNA that they get passed down to us. But we go to the doctor, we tell them that our heart hurts or that our kidney hurts or some physical aspect of ourselves hurts. And yet they never address the emotional cause of why it's hurting. And that's why when we go to a doctor and we are prescribed a pharmaceutical, which they are the antidepressants are the number one prescribed pharmaceutical that is ever prescribed. And we are now seeing the effects, the horrible negative effects of this practice, then we're not dealing with the issue. And we're putting a Band-Aid on something that will only become more and more toxic. And so one of the things that most women make in their healing journey is that they skip over the very important work of forgiveness. And I know when I say this, so many of us are going to be triggered, because when we have been through emotional trauma in this lifetime ourselves, or we have seen patterns of cycles of trauma that our ancestors have gone through, whether that's our parents, our great grandparents, or our grandparents, or we've been told stories of how our ancestors have gone through these painful experiences, then it's very hard and very triggering for us to even consider the fact that we would even need to do any type of forgiveness work. But yet when we go to the doctor, the reason why we have the cancers and the diabetes and all these different things is because we hold these grievances, because we have not actually forgiven. And truly, especially in the work that I teach in my SWC method, the spiritual psychotherapy work that I teach, you go beyond forgiveness to actually learning how to radically accept, which was today our guidance in my stories. If you want to go check out my Instagram stories, radical acceptance. And here's the thing. The reason why it's so triggering for people to do the work of forgiveness is because it's not that it's easier said than done. It's just that biophysically, it's impossible for people to forgive or even to face those things that they haven't forgive because their nervous systems and brains are so completely destroyed because of the emotional or physical trauma. So forgiveness work is something that must be incorporated and that most women skip over. And it must be done in a way that increases our energy so that we can sustain all of those things that we have blocked for such a long time. The sad thing about our generations now is that we truly do not have a deep connection with our ancestors' lineage. So not only do we not know what they went through, we also don't understand. We don't understand where there was abuse and pain, how that had nothing to do with us and our worth, and how it had to do everything with the pain of that particular individual. And even if we look at the pain of that particular individual, I can assure you that that pain was also a pattern, of course, that was done to that individual. And then that individual resorted and responded or reacted by continuing that pattern. And so the work of forgiveness becomes the work of awareness, where we actually, most of us run away from forgiveness and we block and we pretend that we have forgiven or that we don't need to forgive anyone. And then ultimately that, of course, causes the physical ailments, but ultimately we block the awareness. And in the work that we do with ancestral disruption of karmic patterns, we have to first become aware of where we're holding these grievances, whether that is with an ancestor that has passed or transitioned, or whether that is with an ancestor that is still living. Perhaps it's somebody who is your parents or your grandparents, or somebody in your lineage, in your family lineage, that has caused abuse in your family. Because sadly, you know, there are statistics that show that even in cases like sexual abuse, the sexual abuse more often than not, I think the statistic was like 8 out of 10 is from somebody that is a family member, is from somebody that is within the lineage. And sadly, what we do is we tuck those things under the rug. We pretend that they didn't happen. We don't talk about them because of the shame. And then ultimately that affects obviously the person that went through it because they are not seen and acknowledged, but also the forgiveness work is never done. And the number one reason why we keep repeating patterns of anxiety, depression, relationship abuse, sexual abuse is because we have not forgiven, because we haven't received the healing work, the therapy work that we need to go beyond forgiveness and to learn to accept. And here's the thing, you can totally radically accept when you do the inner healing work, holistic work of basically increasing your energy and healing your nervous system and your brain. When you have a stable nervous system because you're meditating, you're inhaling and you're exhaling, which trains and gives exercise to your nervous system, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic part, you're balancing out and you're processing emotions. That allows you to then secrete better chemicals in the brain. You can actually reconstruct the brain from patterns of emotional trauma, literally like regrow it. It's called neuroplasticity. So when the nervous system starts to function better because you're doing the work of meditation, of Kundalini yoga, of actual forgiveness, the spiritual psychotherapy work that I'm talking about, then you are able to basically accept and acknowledge that what happened did occur, but that the reason that that happened is not why you're actually hurting. You see, it's not the trauma that is causing you your pain. It's your perception of the trauma. When our brains are completely deteriorated because we haven't done the forgiveness work, we believe that we're still that 7-year-old child that went through that abuse, or we believe we're still our grandma that went through all of that abuse. Yet when we actually are brave and courageous and we move through the forgiveness work, which ultimately has to do with forgiveness for yourself, believe it or not, then our nervous system becomes more stable, our brain becomes more agile, we learn to be in the present moment more. And then what happens is that we learn to shift our perception. And what we're shifting our perception about is why that person did what that person did. We don't basically, in essence, take it personal and believe that it has something to do with our level of worthiness. Remember, as a child, when you were growing up from the ages of 0 to 7, If your mother or father came home angry because they didn't have enough money, or they were having marital problems, or there were issues around the house, you associated that with your worthiness. You believed, because you were a young child and your brain was still developing, that the reason that they're really mad is because you are not good enough, that you're not worthy. In fact, if you were a child that even went through abuse, that's the healing that needs to happen, because you believe that somehow you orchestrated it, attracted it, or even could have prevented it, could have spoken up, could have said something. And that's where the healing absolutely needs to happen. And the forgiveness work takes us to that level of acceptance, so that we're able to go beyond trying to forgive, and we're able to acknowledge and shift the perception of actually what occurred. So in this work of disrupting ancestral karmic patterns, you cannot, absolutely not, skip over the work that I call forgiveness, which is what spiritual psychotherapy is all about. Now, the second part of the biggest mistakes that women make when breaking cycles of intergenerational karma and trauma has to do a lot with this first step, but it shows up in the physical body. So the second mistake that women make is actually not listening to their bodies, numbing out, right? One of the things we've been working on in the academy, and my Sovereign Woman Academy, my group coaching program to disrupt ancestral karmic patterns, is to get hyper aware and stop bypassing those ways and mechanisms that we actually numb ourselves, whether that is through pharmaceuticals, antidepressants, whether that is through drugs, street drugs, cannabis, all these other things that are out there right now, whether that is through food, whether that is through staying in toxic relationships, whether that is through self-sabotaging our prosperity growth. There are many ways that we actually numb out our emotions. And that is precisely what led our ancestors to their demise. They themselves could not feel the emotions of what they were experiencing. So these emotions then became imprints in the DNA that you're now feeling. That is why the language of the ancestors is of emotions. And so when we don't feel our emotions and we numb our body, we're not listening to wise communication, not only from our ancestors, but from our own body. You see, the body keeps score of trauma, not just from this lifetime, but from many lifetimes before. In fact, your body is a frequency that came with what is known as samskaras. These are scars, imprints, energetic imprints from the lineage and from your ancestors. So when you are born, the samskaras join the soul, and even your body, physically, the way it is built, creates this frequency of those samskaras. So what we do through Kundalini yoga and meditation is we learn to release the memories from the bodies so you can be in your authentic frequency. And the sad part is that when we numb our emotions, we also block the communication and the wisdom of the body. Our body represents the imprints of our ancestors. And so when something physically hurts, first of all, it started as an emotion that you've been blocking for a very long time. Second of all, it is a communication from your ancestors of something that needs to be processed. It's not a punishment. I'll give you an example. One of the things that we're working on in the academy is understanding, for example, our teeth. So your teeth are the most important and the best representation of your ancestral lineage. They show and tell a complete story as to what exactly happened in your lineage, whether you have a strong lineage or not, whether there was a lot of karma, whether trauma, and not only that, but what specific side of your lineage actually is creating the karma, what area of the lineage you actually need to release and work to free from this karmic nature. So to give you an example, the upper part of you have a jaw. You have the upper part of your jaw and you have the lower part of your jaw, right? The upper part of your jaw actually represents the lineage coming from your father's side. The lower part of your jaw represents the lineage coming from your mother's side. Now we separate and we divide the jaw into four. The left part of your upper right jaw is representing your paternal, your father's mom's side of the lineage, maternal side of the lineage, while at the right side, it is representing your father's paternal side. So your grandfather's on your father's side of the lineage, while your bottom jaw The opposite, of course, on the right side, you also have the representation of your mother's father's side of the lineage. And on the left side, you have the representation of your mother's side of the lineage. So mother's side of the lineage. So when you see people with really beautiful, perfect teeth, with a little bit of, there's no even yellow in it, that represents a really strong lineage where there was probably not a lot of trauma or karma. There were probably even holy people in it. Maybe there were saints and royalty, things of that nature, right? But when you see a lot of friction, those root canals, the wisdom teeth that you're not supposed to take out, because that means that your ancestors are talking to you very clearly, or you have cavities, or you have pain in a specific area of your mouth. If, for example, you have pain in the upper left side of your face and it's a specific tooth, then that means that you need to work on specifically the maternal side, or excuse me, the paternal side of your grandmother's lineage. So you can use, the body is always giving you signs, but you can actually study them out. I mean, I can talk about this for hours and hours and hours, because even each tooth represents a particular ancestor. For example, the front two teeth, they represent like your mom and dad ancestors. But then as you get back and more back and more back, like the teeth right here, they represent 3 to 5 generations before your parents or your grandparents. And then all the way in the back, they represent ancient ancestors. So if you're having a problem, let's say with your upper right molar, then you know there's an ancestor that is trying to get your attention on your father's side, on your father's grandfather's side, that has gone through something you're going through right now that needs to be responded to differently. So when we have challenges in our life, we're not being punished. When our ancestral karmic patterns show up the most when we're growing. So you're leveling up in your business. You're going from $100,000 to $500,000. You're leveling up in your relationship. You've aligned with the conscious relationship. You're leveling up in growing in some other area of your life. So anytime you're growing, you're not being punished by the self-sabotage or the chaos that comes with the growth. You're actually being shown where those limiting beliefs that your ancestors have carried are, so that you can release them. You cannot grow to a next level in your life, whether that's a consciousness, prosperity, whether that is healing your body, mind, and spirit, if you haven't dealt with the limiting beliefs that actually have held you in that particular identification of your story. So anytime you're healing, you're leveling up in life, these limiting beliefs are going to come up. And then what happens is the body is going to react and respond. So what we need to do is learn to prepare for our success, right? Learn how to deal with the stress that comes from growth. And stress is not bad. It only becomes bad if you don't know how to manage the stress. Because what happens is, if we're not managing the stress with holistic practices like meditation and yoga, we're probably managing it with drugs and alcohol. So that is what's going to be our demise, because we're not feeling our emotions. And then ultimately what's going to happen is the body's going to respond, which means it's going to create some kind of physical illness. Because like I said, all physical illness starts with an emotion first that you have been ignoring for a very long time. So we numb out and we don't listen to the wisdom of our body. And we also don't realize that there is wisdom in the body, and that the ancestors are speaking through us, like our mouth, or like these particular pains that do show up. And it's almost like a red flag, like pay attention. This is something that we've been through before that we couldn't overcome, that now I'm trying to get your attention through pain so that you can respond differently. And again, the response differently is to feel the emotion, because if we're not feeling the emotion, we're not healing it. And believe me, this is not a guilt trip for all of us. There are so many ways that so many of us actually numb our emotions, and there's no one worse way than the other. They're all mechanisms and ways we do it. We just have to be brave and courageous enough to do what our ancestors couldn't do, which is feel our emotions, and especially when they're showing up as pain in the body, so that we can disrupt the pattern at that level. So the second mistake that women make very often is that they numb their emotions, they look for fast fixes, and they look for that magic pill to not deal with something that has been in our lineage for a very long time, which leads us to the third mistake that most women make, and that is rushing the healing process, rushing the healing journey. You see, infinite patience produces immediate results. In my own healing journey, in the disruption of ancestral karmic patterns, the things that I've accomplished are, for example, I healed the addiction I had to alcohol. I'm almost going to be 4 years strong with no alcohol use, no desire, no cravings, absolutely. There was a very long repeating pattern, and it still is. I've actually had 3 different family members on my father's side and at least 2 on my mother's side that have died from alcohol addiction and from the negative effects of alcohol. And young, I had a cousin recently who was my age, a few months younger than me, who died from alcoholism. So when I was able to heal the addiction to alcohol, it liberated me from a very deep karmic pattern that the ancestors were carrying for a long time. But this was 4 years ago, right? So I continued my work, my inner healing work, and I was growing in many other areas of my life. Remember, I was able to align with my destiny. I left my 15-year business as a real estate broker to start the Sovereign Woman Academy, to start Satori Wellness and Spirituality, where I teach other women how to disrupt these patterns as well, right? And so my life in the last 4 years has been continuous growth. So then from there, I also healed the relationship I had with my husband, with my mom, which are big karmic patterns that also were carried in my lineage of toxicity in relationships, romantic relationships, mother relationships. And that just was like happening and happening and happening. And then I leveled up, right? And my business started to grow. And as I started to level up and grow, other things would come up, right? These karmic patterns. Right now, for example, I'm going through a big, major level up, both in my business, in my relationship at home with my husband. Everything in my life has changed completely and only for the better. So right now, I have been receiving guidance from a particular ancestor, my abuelita, on my dad's side of the family that I never really connected to. I knew her, she died when I was 8 years old, and she died very young from a heart attack. She was overweight. And now that I see her pictures, I see how much she was numbing her emotions and how absolutely depressed and sad she was. And my upper left tooth started to have a little bit of pain. And I continued to do my work. And through my inner work in the last few weeks, my grandma has been coming to me, whether it's through dreams, through other people, whether it's through pictures, visualizations, her memories in very interesting ways. And I realized that I hadn't done any work with my father's side of the lineage. I almost always assumed that it was my mother's side of the lineage that really needed the desperate help, because honestly, I just knew their story more. I knew the trauma that they had been through. And I literally am a duplicate of my abuelita on my mom's side of the family. I literally look like her. I have all the features and much of the personality. So I always kind of related to that. So for me, the journey is not over, and it will never be over. Now, thank God, I am in a conscious relationship where I've healed my marriage 1,000%, right? Thank God I am in a conscious relationship with my mother where I've healed a relationship with her. Thank God that I've healed my addiction to alcohol, right? Thank God that I've done so much major healing where I feel fulfilled. I love what I do, a million things. But that doesn't mean that there's not going to be more growth for me. The healing journey is not linear. The healing journey is cyclical. So it's like a spiral. And so what happens is, as you do the inner work of healing your nervous system and your brain, what starts to happen is your nervous system literally represents your consciousness. So if you have a healthy nervous system because you're not running on a program of abuse and trauma unconsciously, then you're more conscious and you're more present, right? So if you're more present and more conscious, then you collapse time. And also, you are very aware of when your ego is attached to an outcome. The beauty of what is known as karma yoga is, in essence, learning to take action by being. Most of us take action, and the action is attached to an outcome, sadly. So there's an expectation that we're going to receive something from that action that we took. And that's exactly what makes us absolutely tired. And especially as it relates to the healing journey, there's even a beautiful song by Trevor Hall that says, "You cannot rush your healing." You simply cannot, because healing is not linear. And if you set these expectations, which is one of the things that I used to, when I first opened the academy, it was a very fast 8 weeks that you would spend with me. And during those 8 weeks, yes, we got a lot done. And yes, there were major patterns that were broken, but yet there was still so much evolution. It's like one of my community members told me, when I first joined your academy, the first 8 weeks was like going down this rabbit hole, dark night of the soul rabbit hole, where everything I had learned till this day had to be completely rewired and reprogrammed. And then it wasn't until after the 8 weeks that I started to finally feel really like grounded and that setting that foundation and to really see what had occurred. So many of the women in my community, the beautiful part about it is that they can all share their journeys, and they can see how much one has progressed in such a short time. And they can also compare and see how others have taken maybe a little bit longer to get to where they want to be. So being part of a community really helps you, because when you're not part of a community and you feel like you've been stuck in this pattern, or nothing changes for you, or you don't have a mentor or someone to actually talk and get it out and help you coach through it, then it can feel very daunting and it can feel like things are not changing. But I can tell you, and I can assure you, it is like the gym. I mean, when you go to the gym or when you take a supplement, you don't feel the effect of the supplement immediately. And going to the gym, believe me, I've been going to the gym for like 2 years now. And I wish I could say it was super consistent, but I mean, at least 3 to 4 times a week, maybe skipping a week, a month, every month, just because I travel so much and I wasn't as consistent when I would go travel. But, I didn't even start to notice the effects of going to the gym. In fact, my body was like really strange for the first like 3 months. Like I was like, what is this body? Like I've never even recognized it. And then after 3 months, I was like, whoa, now I'm really noticing what happens, right? And thankfully with Kundalini yoga and A Course in Miracles, which is spiritual psychotherapy on steroids, I wouldn't say it takes 8 months, or I wouldn't say it takes 3 months. I mean, 8 weeks is really solid for you to get a lot done. However, the follow-up, meaning the evolution and the sustaining of that frequency, is what's really important. And again, you cannot rush your healing or the process, because you may have healed from an addiction to alcohol, but now you're opening your business and you're growing. So then what happens? Then, well, guess what? Then limiting beliefs are going to come up and you're going to have to face them and you're going to have to deal with them, right? And again, it's not because you're being punished, or that you haven't healed or that you're broken. It's just because you're now in a different frequency of thoughts and emotions. So you have to see the limiting ones that you have not been exposed to yet because of the growth. And so it's very important for us to remember that we cannot rush our healing. And that if there is something that we want to do, is that we need to pay attention to our expectations and to where we are attached to an outcome. Even in a business, if you are, yes, we have goals, we have intentions, and you have the vision of what that's going to look like. But if you're so attached to the outcome, because why? Usually because you're going to feel worthy, they're going to approve of you, society, your mom's going to like you again, whatever that is, right? You're going to fail terribly. You're going to have a lot of challenges and hiccups on the journey, because you're not in the presence of the journey. You are so addicted to only the outcome. So we always have to check in with ourselves, like in business, in our healing journey, to understand, hey, why am I so addicted to that outcome? And how can I bring myself more to the present moment? And the beautiful part, like I said, about being part of the community is that you see the potential, because you see other women that are going through what you've been through, the things that you thought you could never heal from, like
forgiving your mom, or healing from that child abuse or sexual abuse, or healing from those patterns of addiction and anxiety and depression, not only do you see other women doing it, which gives you the infinite patience, produces immediate results, mental mindset, but it also enables you to see that you truly are all on your own divine path. And that the more that you surrender and trust the process of what you're doing, that the quicker you'll be able to collapse time. And of course, that also happens just the way with the second mistake. That happens when your nervous system and your brain become more agile. Through the inner work of meditation and spiritual psychotherapy, as your nervous system becomes more agile, your brain becomes more agile, then you do have more patience in life. I remember when I was a real estate broker and I was not practicing any type of inner healing work. I had the same workload back then running my company and business and family that I do now. But back in the day, I used to wake up in sweats, complete sweat, full of anxiety because of all the things that I had to do. My nervous system was so wrecked that it was just completely creating a situation of overwhelming before I even got to my office or before I even got to what I needed to do. Fast forward to today, I mean, I have the same workload, I have the same amount of demands, if not more, but I don't wake up in that manner. I'm not trying to get to that next point as much as I used to. I mean, the reason sometimes I feel that way now is just because I get super excited and I'm like, I just want to say this or I want to do this. And there's all this stuff going in me that I just want to put out, right? That's creativity for you. And if you don't put it out and birth it, you definitely can have some issues. But infinite patience is provided and given to you when you have a stable nervous system, when you have an agile brain. If you don't have patience for the process of healing, it has everything to do with your nervous system and brain, and has nothing to do with the fact that you're just not a patient person. I think so many of us can classify ourselves as like, oh, I'm just not a patient person. I'm just not a patient person. That is a identity that you are engraving in yourself, and that has nothing to do, just the way there is no such thing as ADHD and ADD. There is no such thing as not having patience. The only thing that you have an issue with, if you don't have patience, especially for your healing journey, is your nervous system and your brain. So we got to heal those two so that you can learn to live in the present moment, be patient with yourself, and have compassion, especially during the healing journey. So to summarize, recapping the three biggest mistakes we made. First, skipping over the forgiveness work, which ultimately leads us to acceptance. Second, not listening to our bodies, numbing out and not connecting with the wisdom, especially as it relates to what our ancestors are trying to tell us. And number three, rushing the healing process, thinking that you should be at a certain place or a certain point, and not accepting that it is not a linear, but a cyclical process, that as you expand and grow consciousness, the things will come up for you not to be punished, not as a self-sabotage mechanism, but ultimately so that you can break through that pattern and move to this next level of your life. So commit to your healing journey today. Embrace forgiveness. Listen to your body and allow yourself the time and space to heal. Together, especially if you're part of a community, you can join our movement and we can all break free from these ancestral patterns and create a life of liberation and fulfillment. That is what I call reclaiming your sovereignty. Keep these in mind, jot them down, and keep them close to your heart so that you can become self-aware of when you are doing these mistakes and get yourself out of it. Thank you all so much for being part of today's live session and today's podcast episode. Thank you for joining the discussion. Thank you for sending questions my way that helped me put together these videos. We'll be back again, of course, next week, same time, same place, where I'll be sharing with you even more information about how to disrupt the ancestral karmic intergenerational pattern by healing your nervous system and rewiring your brain. See you soon.